Also heading home from Norway was the cruiser Devonshire. She carried a precious cargo, King Haakon of Norway and his entire cabinet. Devonshire was under orders from Churchill to safeguard her passengers and maintain strict radio silence. The official report says that at 17:20, Devonshire picked up a garbled message from Glorious with no information about the position of the Germans. That's the version that's now being challenged. Petty Officer Trevor Jenkins was the senior telegraphist on duty in Devonshire that day. He's always insisted that at 16:20 he picked up the full enemy report of 2 PBs, 2 pocket battleships, which McBride had heard going out.
I was in overall charge, you see, and this operator of mine called me over and he said, listen, put the phones on, and I heard it, and the peculiar thing was that the Glorious used her peacetime call sign. This is how I knew it was the Glorious, and her call sign was WS. Never forgotten it, and when I thought WS, and then it was the old break you most immediate, I thought there's something coming. And then, of course, it was 2 PB in the bearing, and then the speed of the enemy that she'd sighted and their course, and then, of course, the position.
The signal was taken to both the captain of Devonshire, John Mansfield, and Vice Admiral John Cunningham, the senior officer on board. Watching was a young midshipman, David Corkhill.
When the signal was handed in, through into the plot from the bridge wireless office, the officer who was on watch there transferred the position onto the chart, and either the captain or the admiral looked at it and said, well, that's almost where we are, but it obviously isn't here now, or we can't see it, or words to that effect. There's no report from the lookouts or anything that they could see anything, so we simply continued on our course.
Trevor Jenkins couldn't believe that Devonshire was leaving Glorious to her fate.
I knew the crew that was on board Glorious, it must have been literally at least 1,000 men, and I thought to myself, well, you know, to turn away from we could have been in action, and, you know, it's something that I've experienced since during the war. You never abandon people when they're in the water, when they've been sunk.
But at this stage, all you had was an enemy report. You
Yes.
knew nothing about the action.
No, but it was logical to assume that 2 pocket battleships were going to sink the Glorious. There was no doubt about it in my mind.
The Admiralty say there's no evidence for Jenkins's allegations. Admiral Cunningham in Devonshire knew nothing of Glorious's plight. But Devonshire's log records that at 16:25, 5 minutes after Jenkins noted his signal, the captain ordered exercise main armament, the first time they'd done so for 4 weeks.
He must have received a signal which indicated to him that there was a threat, a surface threat. Main armament of a cruiser are the big guns, and the big guns are used in a surface action, not against aircraft. They would have closed up at action stations. And he wouldn't have done that if he hadn't received a signal which indicated that there was a threat in the vicinity.
I've never lied about it. It is an absolute fact that I read that enemy report. And it wasn't garbled. It was made by a skilled operator.
Could you have made a mistake?
Oh, no. I couldn't make a mistake like that. You must remember there was an operator who called my attention to it, plus the fact there was another operator in the main wireless office. Surely 3 operators couldn't make the same mistake, could they?
We know not of this signal that is repeated to have been received there. If it was, can be proved, yes, proved, that it was received, then yes, there are questions to be asked, and you're right to be asking them.
Is the evidence of the chap who was there, who took the signal, not enough?
Not unsupported. I wouldn't believe my parish priest, 48 years after the event, suddenly coming forward with a statement. I would need something or other. It's too long after the event for human memories. Unsupported.
That sounds to me like a cover-up in hindsight, because there was no distortion or faintness or anything about that report, I'm sure of that.
In 1988, Captain Harold Dean, a member of the Admiral's staff in Devonshire, remembered the dilemma the message created. Receipt of the intercepted emergency enemy report from Glorious posed a grave problem. On the one hand, orders to maintain wireless silence were explicit. On the other was natural desire to do something. I recall the Admiral slumped in the corner of the bridge, chain-smoking, and convinced that he would be condemned for turning his back on Glorious. Knowledge of the intercepted signal, wrote Dean, was restricted as far as possible, so as to avoid ill feeling among the ship's company.
The flag lieutenant came into the remote control office and he said to me, "The Admiral wants the remaining copy of the signal and the operator's log." So I said, all right, I got a new log out, and I wrote in the old log that this log has been handed over to Vice Admiral John Cunningham at his request, and a new log has been handed over to the operator. And I signed it and dated it.
The original operator's log, handed to Admiral Cunningham, has never reappeared. He did break radio silence at 2 o'clock next morning to ask for a destroyer escort for King Haakon, but didn't mention Glorious until later, and then to say only that Devonshire had received a garbled report from the aircraft carrier. In 1946, the Labour MP Richard Stokes pressed the government for a public inquiry into the sinkings. An internal memo from R.R. Powell, head of Military Branch 2, was dismissive. A full report at this date would make very dismal reading and would invite Mr. Stokes or other MPs to ask why this or that was not done.
We turned away from it all, which I think is a terrible thing to do. It grieves me to think about it.